This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so in yesterday's demo session, we have covered about what is performance testing, what are the various tools in the market, what is LoadRunner architecture all about, what are the different components of LoadRunner architecture. We have also seen a sample or a simple record and replay flow using Fusion, which is one of the component of LoadRunner. We have also gone through the LoadRunner course content, and then we address few questions, right? So continuation to that, in today's session, I would like to explain different types of performance testing. Okay, so I do have slides for these, the different types of performance testing. But for today, I would like to write the content or the definitions of those or the points related to those different types of performance testing in this notepad. Okay, however, I will be sharing the slides as well, okay, later on. So what was the definition of performance testing we discussed yesterday? So it was all about like this. I mean, at a generic level, checking the performance of an application, okay, by applying some load. So this is the definition we have seen yesterday, right? Or you can write a software application. Checking the performance of a software application by applying some load. It's all about performance testing, okay, for software. Now, what is load here as per yesterday? Load means number of users. Okay, that's what we discussed yesterday. Now, let me uh, list down the types of performance testing first. So, first will be smoke test. Second, load test. Third, stress testing. Because it's not always a single or a simple performance test. There are different types of performance testing as well. So depending on the requirement, you have to select the type of performance testing and you have to execute. When you have endurance or soak or duration test, all these three are same. Okay. Then you have scalability test as well. Very. Then you have failure volume test. Failover test. Okay. Then you have something like okay. So these are the different types of performance testing we have. Out of these eight, this eighth one we will discuss in the next session because there is some dependency. Okay, so before you understand what is failover test, how do you perform failover test, first you have to understand the meaning of server, web server, app server, DB server, those kind of terminologies. So that's the reason we will cover tomorrow. Okay, because tomorrow session is all about servers and all those things. So let's discuss about types of performance testing today. The first one is smoke test. Okay, smoke test is a basic test that we do Okay, so let's say before you run a load test, or before you run a stress test, or before you run an endurance test, we will run a smoke test. So we run smoke test to ensure that the end-to-end scripts are working fine. See, when do we execute scripts? Once we complete development, script development, right? So before you run the load test or any other type of test here, the major test like load, stress, and all. Before running those type of tests, you have to run a smoke test for sure. Smoke test will ensure that your scripts are working fine. Okay. At the same time, we can also find out. We can also find out if application is working or if application is up and running. See, basically, smoke test we run with very limited number of users, like 2 users, 3 users. We run for specific number of times, like 5 times, 3 times, or 5 iterations, or 3 iterations, or let's say we run for 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, or 15 minutes max. So it's not like we run for longer duration. We run for a very limited time with limited number of users. Okay. So why we run smoke test with limited number of users and limited amount of time? For example, 2 users per 5 minutes, something like this. We need not run for hours together to know whether the application is up and running or to know whether our scripts are working fine, right? Okay. So generally we run the smoke test to ensure that the end-to-end scripts are working fine. At the same time, you can also find out if the application is up and running perfectly without any major issues. We run smoke test with limited users and limited amount of time. For example, 2 users, 5 minutes, something like that. Example. Okay. Now, if your application has multiple scenarios, then each scenario you can schedule it for 5 minutes and with 1 or 2 users like that. Like if you have multiple scenarios, like if you take a banking application, you can have multiple scenarios like transfer money, uh, download statement, paying credit card bill, right? So these are multiple scenarios in a banking application. So if you want to test the banking application, like including all these multiple scenarios, so first you need to run a smoke test for all of these. So you have to create a scenario in controller, upload all these scripts in controller, and schedule the execution in such a way that each script or each scenario will or each script will run for 5 to 10 minutes with very limited number of users. Okay. So any questions? Did you guys understand smoke test? So this is a very first test that we do. Okay. So this is a prerequisite. Okay. You can say like this test is a prerequisite for other type of tests. It means before you run any other type of test, you have to do smoke test for sure. If smoke test is a failure, okay, if smoke test is failed, then you cannot run other tests at all. For example, you are planning to run a load test today evening. Now, just before load test, few minutes ago or few couple of hours ago, you ran a smoke test, and the application is down. Your smoke test has failed. Then you cannot run the load test. Okay. So this is all about smoke testing, guys. Any questions about smoke testing?
Not
I mean,
question,
whoever
but
is.
are we gonna go over like how to do the like how to taste it?
So you mean to say how to do it practically?
Uh-huh. Are we gonna go over that?
Yes, 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 but not no. We don't have. We we don't have scripts ready, right? We didn't learn the development of scripts first. So
Right,
this
right.
the execution comes after script development. So we are going to do these things after 3 to 4 weeks. But because these are theoretical concepts, we have to understand the theoretical concepts first,
Hmm.
and then when time comes, we'll do it practically for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So then next one is load testing. Very very important. The first major type of test that we do. First major test. Okay, in performance. So why it is a major test? See, this smoke test is not a major test. It's just a prerequisite. Okay, it's a small test to ensure that whether the application is up and running, whether your scripts are working fine. So only those things you will check. But when it comes to load test, this is the first major performance test that we do. Okay, or you can simply say this is the first major performance test. Okay, so what do you mean by load testing? So basically, performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Let me write that here. Performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So remember the terms speed, stability, and scalability. I will be relating these terms to any of these type of tests, okay, today. So if you see load testing is all about checking the speed of the application, okay, uh, by applying the expected load. Checking the speed of the application by applying some load. What do you mean by speed of the application? That means how fast a user is able to navigate from one page to another page. Like if you click a link or if you click a button, how much time it is taking for the page to load. That is the speed, right? Now, you if you ask me, do you have any standard to verify the speed? Yes. The standard response time is 2 seconds. This is the industry standard, yes. However, it can vary from project to project. It can be 3 seconds, 5 seconds also. Okay. But in general, if it has to be less than 2 seconds. Like if you enter username and password for any application, if you click on login button, you should log in successfully in 2 seconds. That is the expectation, market expectation. Okay. So checking the speed of the application by applying some load, standard response time is 2 seconds. What do you mean by expected load, guys? Again, load is number of users. Who is giving this load? Let's say I want to do the load testing for my banking application, but how do I get to know the load? With how many users I have to test? How do I know? Who will give the information? So the client or business analyst or anyone from application team will give you the number of users. Okay. For example, you can say 500 users, 500 users, right? So the load data, the load volumes will always be given by the application team or the business analyst or the client. So what are we going to verify? We are going to verify the speed, how the application is responding. So the general industry standard is 2 seconds. Now load test will always be run for 1 hour of steady state. See, load test will run for 1 hour, guys. Okay, any load test will run for 1 hour, excluding ramp up and ramp down. So because we haven't discussed the terms ramp up and ramp down, which will come later point of time, no worries. But just remember that load test will always be run for 1 hour of steady state. Okay, or you can simply remember load test will be run for 1 hour. Okay, now as I said, smoke test you can run for 5 to 10 minutes max, but load test you should always run for 1 hour, mandatory. Okay, now load test will run for 1 hour. You're checking the speed of the application, number of users, standard response time is 2 seconds. Okay, now when you run a load test, you are specifically targeting to identify the bottlenecks, such as the response times. Okay, any other errors. Okay, so frequent bottlenecks are high response times. High response times is what we observe. Then application related errors. Okay, so I mean we'll discuss this. Not yet completed. So 500, like 500, 502, 503, okay, like this error codes. So when you run a test, you get to see these sort of errors from application point of view. So frequently we observe these things. High response times, application errors like 500. What is 500 error code? What is 502? We'll discuss later. But these are the error codes. Okay, you also have something like 404, 401, 403, but we'll discuss all of them later. Okay, so any questions about load testing? Simple thing. We are verifying the speed of the application. What do you mean by speed? How the application is responding, how the web pages are loading. Okay, how much time it is taking for one user to for a user to navigate from one page to other page. So all these things, are observed as part of the load test. Okay, this is the first major type of test that we do. If this particular test is a failure, then you cannot run other types of testing like stress test, endurance test, scalability test, volume test, spike test, failure test. You will not run all these types of tests if this test is a failure. Okay, now how do you know, how do you say whether the test is a pass or fail? How do you say uh, whether the load test is a pass or fail? Failure reasons. Okay, test failure reasons. The number of errors, or if the number of failed transactions are more than or greater than 2%, then it is a failed. Then it's a failed test. Simple logic. Okay, if 1 second. Okay, so if the number of failed transactions are greater than 2%, then it's a failed test. So what do you mean by that? So let's say you run a load test. Okay, if you run a 1 hour load test, and after that 1 hour load test, you got some, let's say, 15,000 past transactions, and let's say, after, okay, you say you got 15,000 past, and let's say you have 1,200 failed transactions. So what is 1,200 of what percentage of 15,000 is 1,200? So if you see for 15,000, 1% is 150. 2% is 300. Now, if the error should not exceed 300. Now, if you are getting 200, it's a failed test. Okay, like that. So here I can say, then failed transactions should not exceed 300, like this. Okay. So 150 is 1%, 2% is 300. So your failed transaction should not exceed 300. So if it exceeds 300, it's a failed test. You have to run again. You have to run again. So as long as this test is passed, you cannot go for load test. And one more thing is, if errors are or if failures are less than 2%, which is good, but observed very high response times, then also it is not a success. So again, you have to fix it. Why you are getting very high response times? Okay, why you are getting, like, when you click a link or a button, why it is taking like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds to load? So in this case, you have to fix these issues first, and then only you can go for other types of tests. So these things you have to consider, whether you want to move to other type of test, or whether you want to fix the current issues by working with development team and then rerun the test, and then once it is successful, then only you have to go to other type of test. So any questions here? We, we
So
will we will
yes.
we will run this practically also later on, but just understand
Uh-huh.
theoretically for now.
Yeah, but quick question. So there is gonna be only like the failure when it is 2%. If we fix this, the load taste always will be good. The only reason is just this one right here, right?
No, no. I mean, see, failures are different, response times are different. So if the number of failures, see, if response times are good, let's say if response times are good, but if the failures are greater than 2%, still it is a failed test. Okay, so
Okay.
that means your failure should always be less than 2%. At the
Uh-huh.
same time, your response time should also be good. Okay,
Oh,
that
okay.
means your transaction response time should not exceed 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 5 seconds according to your project SLA. Okay, so generally they call it as SLA. Here I mentioned standard response time, right? So they call it as SLA. SLA stands for service level agreement. So what do you mean by this service level agreement? It's an agreement between client and the application team. The client says that, hey, for my application, all the response time should be less than 2 seconds. That is the agreement, because he is
Mm-hmm.
paying huge amount for the application team, right? He's spending so much amount. Now he has his own conditions. So the client will say that, for my application, all the response time should be less than 2 seconds. That is the SLA. So when we run a load test, okay, we have to make sure that all the transaction response times are within this SLA.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So along with the failures, you should also concentrate on the SLA. Okay, so that is also important. Now let's say you run a load test. There are so many transactions, so many steps that you executed. Now let's say there are some 300 400 steps. Out of those 300 400, only if 3 or 4 are more than 2 seconds, okay, then no problem. You can just tell the application team that only these 3 or 4 are getting more than 2 seconds response time. Can you please look into it? So the application team will then analyze how critical are those 3 or 4 transactions. Okay, how critical are those? If those 3 or 4 are not that critical, they will say that, okay, we agree that these are high response times. We will fix it in the next release, or we will fix it after few days. So let's continue. No need to stop. Okay, go ahead and run other types of tests. Go ahead and identify anything else. So something like that. Okay, I'll tell you all the possible conditions. Okay, what the application team will say, what we have to respond. Okay, all those possible ifs and buts, I'll explain you know when we deal with this practically.
Okay.
So for
Thank you.
now, hope you got little clarification about what is load test, and how we are going to run and all those things. So we are going to run for 1 hour. We are going to verify for this SLA timings. Okay, we should also see the overall test pass or fail based on these conditions. Our primary task is to identify these bottlenecks. Okay, like that. Now, once the load is successful, we will go to stress testing. So what do you mean by stress testing? Testing the application with more number of users than the load test. Simple. No need to think much. Whatever the number of users that you tested here in the load test, anything above that can be a stress testing. So for example, in the load test above, we mentioned 500 users, right? So anything above 500 can be considered as a stress testing. That means you are stressing the system or you are stressing the application beyond the limit. So this is the max load that the client has given. The client got this number from some historical data. Like, the client thought that at any point of time, the max number of users accessing my application will be 500. You got it? Are you understanding? The client thought that at any point of time, the max number of users using my application will be 500 only. So that's the reason the first test we are doing with max number of users, that is 500. Now anything beyond that 500 will be considered as a stress testing. Okay, like you can run with 500, 600, 700, 800. Okay, like 600, 700, 800 can be considered as a stress testing only. Okay. However, there might be a situation where client can also ask to apply the stress until the system breaks. Okay, that is also possible. Okay, like a client can ask you, hey, can you test or can you apply the load or can you keep on increasing the load or keep on stressing the system until it breaks. Okay, sometimes client can also ask us to check the breaking point. Okay, what do you mean by breaking point? Keep on increasing the users until system breaks. I'll tell you one thing. Let's say there is a restaurant. In the restaurant, there are 5 tables. There is a owner, there is one owner, and there is one helper who is assisting the customers. Like the helper is taking the orders, food orders from the table from the customers, and then delivering the food as well. Now the helper was managing 5 tables. Now client, now there was a demand. There is a huge demand. So the owner of the restaurant decided to increase the number of tables from 5 to 8. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let's say 5 to 7. Now helper who was managing 5 tables, now he is managing 7 tables. Okay. Now he is managing 7 tables. Now again there is a huge demand. Now the owner decided to increase the number of tables from 7 to 9. Then the helper was still able to manage 9 tables, but with delayed response. That means with 7 tables, he was able to take the order and deliver the food in 15-20 minutes onto the table. But when it comes to 9, he was able to take the order, but he was not able to deliver the food on time. Like he was taking like 30-40 minutes now. Now there is huge demand again. The owner increased the number of tables from 9 to 11. Then the helper said, no, I cannot do it anymore. I'm leaving. I'm quitting my job. He left. What does that mean? That means the max the helper could do or manage was only 7 tables or 9 tables. That too with very delayed response. Okay. So that is a breaking point. the helper cannot manage more than that. That is a breaking point. So similarly, for application also, there will be some breaking point. So the application can break, okay, at some point of time. So rarely the client can also ask us to check the breaking point, keep on increasing the users until the system breaks. Okay, this is rarely, and we don't do it frequently, not every release. Okay, the stress testing can also be, uh, 1 hour. You can run it for 1 hour. Basically, you, frequent bottlenecks are again high response times. Okay, system crashes, or application crashes. Okay, these are the frequent bottlenecks that we observe. Any doubts in stress testing? Then you have important one called endurance or soak or duration test. This type of test is all about checking the stability of the application. Stability of the application. Okay. So what you mean by checking the stability of the application means this test will run for 3 hours or 5 hours or 8 hours or 1 day or 2 days, or it can run up to 5 days also in very rare cases. Okay, so that we are checking the stability of the application here. What do you mean by stability? So that means, let's say I'm running a 5 hours endurance test. So it's not like load test and stress test where you do 1 hour, where you run for 1 hour your application. Okay, here we run for longer duration. So the test will run for 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, like that. So it all depends on project to project. So mostly the endurance test they will try to run for 5 hours or 8 hours. Okay, that's the most common thing. Rarely they will run for 1 day or 3 hours or 2 days also. Okay, I'll tell you why they run for just 3 hours instead of 5 hours or 8 hours. I'll tell you that. But the most common thing is 5 hours or 8 hours. So what are the important things why we have to run this endurance or soak test is to check the stability. What do you mean by stability? When you are running a test for longer duration, how the application is behaving in the first 1 hour, how the application is behaving in the second 1 hour, how the application is behaving in the third 1 hour, like that. So for example, in first 1 hour, the response times, okay, the response times were like average, on an average, let's say 2.5 seconds for any one. I'm just taking for one transaction on an average, 2.5 seconds. Okay. Uh, in the second 1 hour, in second hour, what is the response time? In third 1 hour, what is the response time? Like that, you have to verify. That means the response time, whatever you are getting, should be consistent throughout the test. Like in the first 1 hour, if it is 2.5 seconds, second 1 hour, if it is 2.5 seconds, in the third 1 hour, if it is going to 8 seconds or 10 seconds, that means there is some issue. Your application is not consistent enough. Something is going wrong. Your application is not stable. So that's the reason we run the test for longer duration to find out any stability related issues. Okay, uh, frequent bottlenecks are high response times that we check. At the same time, there is something called memory leaks. So there is something called memory leaks, which we will discuss later. But this memory leaks will happen rarely, and if it happens, it will happen mostly in endurance test, because this test is run for longer duration, And when a test is run for longer duration, there is a high chance of memory leaks issue. Okay, so what is memory leak and all those things we'll discuss later. Okay, any questions? So what is the difference? Okay, one more thing is, what is the amount of load that you have to apply? See, in some projects they go with 100% of the load. That means same as load test, same as load test. In some projects, okay, in some projects they will go with 75% of the load. It all depends on how your project is managing. Okay, it all depends on uh, how your project is managing. 75% of load test users, right? You got it. So if your project is following something out of these two, you continue to use the same. If your project is not following anything, you are the one. If you have to start the endurance test for the first time, then run with the same load as load test. Run with same users as load test. Okay, so that's how you need to follow. Any questions in this endurance test? Are you guys getting what is endurance test all about?
Yes,
We run
but
for
quick
longer
question.
duration.
What
Yeah,
is the
tell me.
difference, like the amount of load and the user of load taste? I thought it would be the same. No?
Same. So same. I'll not confuse.
Load, okay, okay.
Okay.
So if it is like 500 user, it will be the
Yes,
same
yes,
as the user. Okay.
yes. Same. Okay. So that is about endurance test or soak test, guys. So the next one is scalability testing. So scalability testing is all about checking the scalability of the application, as the name suggests. Basically, it is run considering the future growth of the application. So scalability test will be run based on future growth. So let's say now client said that, hey, now you have run a load test with 500 users. That's great. But what I assume is, in the next 6 months or 1 year, my my company or my business will grow by 200%. My company or business will grow by 200%. That means if you are testing a load test with 500 users now, that means if you want to add a 200% more, then that means you have to test for 1500 users now itself. Or if your client says like this, hey, you have run a load test with 500 users. However, I'm expecting my business to grow by 50% in next 6 months. So that means you have to run the scalability test with 750 users now. You got my point? Okay. So for example, current load test is current load test you run is with 500 users. So growth expected by client in next 6 months is 50%, let's say. Okay, ignore spelling mistakes here and there. Okay, so now because the growth expected by client in next 6 months is 50%, now itself, okay, now itself we have to run a 150% load test. You got it? What do you mean by 150? Normally the load test what you run is 100%. Normally, whatever the load test you run is, this you can call it as 100% load test. 100% load test. Okay, this is the max number of users that the client assumed. So in the next 6 months, the growth is expected by 50%. That means now itself you have to run a 150% load test. That is 750 users. 150 users. See, what is 50% of 500? 250. So 250 plus 500, 750 users. Now itself you have to run. Okay. Now I will tell you one example. Recently, what happened? I mean, there can be some ad hoc requests also. When it comes to scalability, mostly the requests will be ad hoc. For example, recently what happened? We all know that we all know about the pandemic, COVID, right? COVID pandemic, right? So during COVID pandemic, I was actually at that point of time I was working for US bank. Okay, one of the top banks in US. I was supporting the top banks application. So one fine day, I mean, it was around June, I think June to 2020, I guess. Okay. Um, so when the COVID pandemic started, so what happened at that point of time is people were not going to banks directly. I mean, we all know, right? We were not supposed to roam outside or unless it is very important. So people were not going to banks directly. Rather, they were trying to fix everything online through banking applications or through some IVR calls, like support calls. So what? So one day, client scheduled a meeting with us and said, "Hey, we observed that there is a huge increase in the number of users accessing our banking applications. Now, we assume that in the next 3 months, the number of users will increase, okay, up to 400%. The number of users will increase up to 400%. Can you let us know with the current infrastructure, with the current servers configuration and all those things, are will our applications withstand the 400% load?" Okay, the client clearly asked us, "Can you check if our applications will be able to withstand 400% of load?" Okay, because in the next 3 months they are expecting 400% of load. Okay, due to pandemic. That's what the client mentioned. Now, what did we do immediately? Can you tell what we have to do at that point of time? Can anyone tell what we have to do at that point of time? Anyone?
Need to do the breakpoint test.
No, client is expecting up to 400% load in the next 3 months. So what should you do?
So we will increase
I
the
mean,
load and find out the response times accordingly.
so that means should we run 400% load?
No, no, we increase the load in a gradual manner.
So here normally normal load test we would have done by default we would have run a 100% load test that we might have already done because that's an existing application, right? That's an existing application. We might have already covered this, but because of pandemic, suddenly client gave a requirement that the number of users can increase up to 400% in next 3 months. So what we have to do is here directly we cannot run for 400% load. Okay, why we cannot run 400% load directly? Can anyone tell? Why we should not run a 400% load test directly? Because client said the users can increase up to 400%, but why shouldn't we run 400% directly? Anyone? Just a guess. I mean, it's okay if it is wrong also.
So it will be on the stress test. I don't know. There's.
So the reason why we don't run 400% directly, okay. So instead of running a 400% directly, we increase the load like this. Then we run 200% load test,
Um,
okay, which is 1,000 users. Okay? I mean, it's not about users. It's also about the target iteration, the target that we have to achieve, like in terms of transactions per hour or iterations. But for now, I'm just telling you the users. Otherwise, the target can be number of iterations as well. But anyways, let's discuss like this for today. So 300% load test is what we do next. Then finally, we do 400% load test. So why we don't do 400% load test is, see, this is a common thing that we have done already. Okay, assume that we have already done. Now, because of pandemic, client is asking us to do this testing. But we cannot do this directly, because if we run this test and if the application crashes, or okay, if something goes wrong here, then will you be able to tell whether the application can withstand 200% and 300%? Your client is saying the number of users can go up to 400%, but at least if 400% is failing, you should be able to tell client that, hey, our application is not able to withstand 400% load. However, it can support up to 300. Can you give guarantee to that? No. That's the reason you have to go in a gradual manner. Okay. Now, when at that point of time, we were testing for around 15 to 20 applications, okay, as a team. Out of that, we observed that for around 7 to 8 applications, only 7 to 8 applications they were supporting until 400% load with the current configuration at that point of time, like whatever the CPU, memory, and the server configurations, whatever we had at that point of time. Out of like 15 to 20, only 7 or 8 were working, or only 7 to 8 were able to withstand this 400%. Now the remaining like 9 to 10 or whatever the number of applications, they were failing either at 200 or at 300. They were crashing there itself. Now what the client has to do at that point of time immediately? No other option, directly increase the infrastructure. Like if the RAM is 8 GB, increase it to 16 GB. Okay, if the CPU is dual core or something like that, increase to octa core, something like that, increase the cores, number of cores in the CPU. like like the only thing that they can do it is increase the infrastructure, or they can add multiple servers. Okay, they can add multiple servers, like that, what we call as scale out. Okay, the term that we use, the term that we use called scale out. Okay, scale out, I will explain you tomorrow also. This one, scale out means adding additional servers. Okay, if you don't want to add additional servers, if you want to upgrade existing one, you can do scale up. Means upgrading existing servers. Okay, now based on the output, the client can take any of this decision. Either the client can say, hey, go ahead and scale out, add additional servers. The user should not face any problem. All the users should be able to use my banking application perfectly. So client can take any decision immediately. Of course, they are big banks, right? So they will take these are small decisions for them. So they will add all those servers, whatever required. They'll make sure that users are not facing any issues. Okay, that is about scalability testing, guys. Okay, what about the next one? Volume testing. Volume testing is similar to load test. It is completely similar to load test, except that there will be a huge amount of data in the database. Okay, for the volume test, I'll tell you example. So this test is done very rarely, primarily focusing on the database. Okay. Now for load test, let's say for load test, you ran with 500 users. You ran with 500 users. That's fine. But when you ran with 500 users, okay, there were some 1 lakh records in database. there were 1 lakh records in database. What do you mean by records? See, let's say okay. Now let me tell like this. So let's say for load test, you ran with 500 users, and there were 1 lakh records in database for that particular application. There were 1 lakh records in database. Now, in future, the number of records can increase to 4 lakhs. Okay, let's assume client said number of records in database can increase to 4 lakhs. Okay, can increase to 4 lakhs. So what you have to do now? Now itself, you have to insert 4 lakh records, 4 lakh records in DB with help of DB, a database administrator, and then run a load test. That's it. See, it's like a load test only. We are not doing any change. Only thing, there is no change in number of users. Only change is we are increasing the number of records in the database, backend database, so that you can check if number of records are increasing in the database, how the application is responding. See, for example, guys, why the test is, see, I'm starting a new college. Okay, I'm starting my own university. Now, in my university, uh, obviously for my university, I will have a website, my university website. It can contain, the university website can contain the information related to all the students, all the administration, admin teachers, admin guys, staff, and other staff members, right? Now I just started the university this year. Now the number of records, or the number of records in database can be like 5,000, something like that. Now let's assume I ran my university. I was able to run my university successfully for 10 years. After 10 years, imagine the number of records in the database. So many thousands of students joining, okay, completing the course, getting convocations and all. Okay, that means the data, I have to preserve the data. All my students' data I have to preserve. That means the number of records in my database can increase, okay, drastically after 5 years or 10 years. So that's the reason, focusing on the data. If there is a huge amount of data in the database, how your application is responding. So that is about volume testing. It is completely similar to load test. You have nothing to do. You just have to run a load test only. But only changes in the back end, you just have to increase the records. How you cannot insert the data directly. You won't have access. You have to take the help of database administrator to increase the required number of records for your test. Okay, this is again run for 1 hour, because it's a similar to load test, right? So all the remaining things will be same. Only thing is records will be increased. Okay, so primary focus will be how the backend SQL queries are running. So you know about SQL, right? I mean, basically SQL is a language which is used to fetch or access records in the database. It can do many other things like inserting data, fetching data, updating data, deleting data, like that. But whatever it is, so the primary focus will be on the SQL queries, how the SQL queries are performing when there are many records in the database. This is very, very rare, guys. We don't do frequently, but just that's there. I have explained it. Any questions?
When this volume test is recommended by the client or from our team, because as you mentioned, it is similar to the load test. So when this load test exactly will be performing?
Load test or volume test?
Sorry, volume test.
What? Okay. So it's not like recommended. If they feel that their database, uh, you know, can have some issues. For example, let's say you run a normal load test, everything was working fine except you have some issues with this, with respect to database. In the load test only, you saw some queries which are running for long, like you observed some long running queries, or there is some performance degradation with respect to queries. Okay, then they will make some changes like performance tuning, database tuning, okay, query tuning they will do in the backend. Now after they do all those things, if client wants us to check, okay, now we have done all the tunings. Now let's increase the number of records and see how it supports. Okay, so if in that case they will give a try. Otherwise, it's not required. It's purely a kind of database performance testing. Okay, like it's like more of a database performance testing rather than a web application performance testing. You can say like that. However, we are applying the load through UI only, through application UI only, but primary focus is on how the database queries are working. See, instead of doing that, instead of applying the load through UI, you can actually directly connect to database and run queries. That is also there. You can do that type of test also. We call it as a database load testing. Okay, you can do that type of testing as well. Directly connect to database, run SQL queries, and if you want, you can run stored procedures and all, and you can see how the database is performing. You can do that also. Okay, so which is very rare. Whenever client says, then only you can do, or whenever the DBA or application team wants us to do, then only we'll do. Now, if you ask me when did you do last time, sir, I haven't done in last 2-3 years. I never tested this in last 2-3 years. When there was no requirement. That's the reason I'm saying it's very rare. I worked with various clients, but there was no such requirement. It's just there to discuss. It's there. That's it. But database load test, it's there. I mean, you can do it. Frequently, they will. I mean, depending on the application, they will ask us to do the database load testing also. But it should be a database project. I mean, it's a normal web application, and they won't ask us to do a database load testing for a normal web application. The application itself, the project itself should be a database project. Then only we will directly do the database load testing. Okay. Then you have spike test. Spike testing basically is again kind of ad hoc test. Okay, which we don't do for every project. Spike testing means like I mean we try to give a sudden spike in that means in terms of increase of users or decrease of users. Okay, so that means uh, like suddenly I'm increasing some 30-40 users, 100 users suddenly in a fraction of second or in 2 seconds, and after 2 or 3 minutes suddenly I will decrease the number of users. Okay, like it's a type of performance testing. Okay, where we apply a sudden and extreme increase or decrease in load. Okay, there is no predefined number like how many users suddenly you will increase, how many users suddenly you will decrease. No, there is no predefined number. Whatever the performance tester or application team mutually agrees, they will suddenly increase the number, suddenly decrease the number. So you have to handle this thing in controller only. You cannot do anything here. Okay, it's all about, okay, it's all about sudden increase or decrease, okay, in load. Okay, simple. We cannot write much more than this. Okay, we don't do frequently, right? So that's the reason. So what else is there? Okay, failover test we'll discuss tomorrow because there is a dependency. I have to draw a diagram and explain you failover test, what happens, how should we work with development team and all those things. So these are the different types of performance testing, guys. So I'm going to share this with you also, this document, so that you can use it as a reference in future. Types of performance testing. Okay. So any questions? So tomorrow, oh yeah, tell me. So tomorrow we are going to discuss about what is a server, what is application server. Now I told you server configurations, infrastructure, and all those things, right? First of all, we should know what is server because that is the frequent term that we use in our projects. Day in, day out, we use the term. So what is a server? What is web server? What is database server? What is application server? What is protocol? Okay. So all these things we'll discuss tomorrow, and we'll also discuss failover test. Any questions?
Yes, I have a quick question. So is this gonna be like just 8 tastes, no more than that? The last step will be failover taste?
Yes. These are enough. Yeah.
Okay. And one more question. So this is the step, like first we have to do smoke taste, then load taste, then stress taste, or like the client have to tell us like you have to do this kind of taste.
Good question. So normally, see, if client is aware of performance testing, if the
Mhm,
application team is completely aware of performance testing, they will suggest us what type of test to run. Okay, like actually, so when you are assigned to a project, okay, it will be let's
mhm,
say it's a completely new project. Now what you have to
yeah.
do is, the first thing is you have to connect with the application team or the business analyst or the client to understand the application requirements. Okay, so there is a separate session for that day after tomorrow. So as part of that, I'll explain what are the different questions you need to ask, okay, and get the information from the application team. Okay, as part of that only, we ask them what type of testing we have to do. What are you expecting from us? So
Mhm,
basically, if the application team is completely aware of performance testing, they will say, hey, can you run a load test, an endurance test, and a kind of scalability test for us? Okay, they will tell us. If client is not aware of anything, if application team says, hey, we are not aware, just run the whatever the normal or the common types of tests that you do for every application, same thing you apply for our application also. If they say something like that, then you have to run. The smoke test is common. I mean, it's not something specific. You have to run anyways. So the common types of tests that we suggest for every application is load testing, endurance testing, and scalability testing. These three are the common types of tests that we suggest for every application. If client is not suggesting anything, you have to suggest these three: load,
mhm.
endurance, scalability.
Okay.
Okay, so
Okay, thank you
apart
so
from
much.
this, if all the others depending on client requirement, you can go ahead and do, otherwise not required.
Okay, so focus with the 3-1 first. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so
Okay,
much.
any other questions? Okay, so tomorrow I'll add a couple of points on failover test here, and then I'll share the document to you guys as well. So thank you. Yeah, tell me. Okay, uh, so let's connect again tomorrow same time. Hope all of you understood the concepts today. If you have any further queries, you can reach out to me. Yesterday I couldn't reach out to one of you guys regarding the recording settings, recording options. Actually, I need a separate session for that to explain actually the recording options. But at a very high level, in 3 to 4 minutes, if you want me to tell, I'll tell now. But again, you should not say that it didn't work, because as I said, I need some time to explain. I mean, it will take some time to explain all the recording options. If you are on call now, I can share the screen and I can explain the recording options if you whatever you are facing. I'm not sure who is that.
Yeah, yeah, I am on the call. Thank you.
Okay.
Mm.
So, I mean, I'm just telling you at a very high level, but I cannot guarantee that it will work for you right away, because as I said, there are many things that you need to look into. So you just have to go to recording options. Hope you're able to see the screen.
Yes, I can see.
Okay, go to recording options. Here, in the, I mean, you can take screenshots also if you want. In the HTML based, choose HTML based script here. And in the HTML advanced, click on HTML advanced button. And you can choose the second option here and the third option here. Okay, what are these options and all we'll discuss later. But for you, you can choose this option and this option for now. Okay, then you come here and click on advanced. Come here and click on advanced and uncheck or disable this option, generate web ad cookies. You can disable. Okay, you can disable web ad cookies. You can disable this. Then what you do, go to headers. I mean, click on this headers tab, sorry, headers button. Okay, click on this headers button, and here you have to choose record headers in list. Okay, if anything else is selected, change it to record headers in list, and don't select anything. Don't select anything except CSRF token and authorization. If you don't see authorization, no problem, leave it for now. But if you see some CSRF token, just check it. That's it. Don't do anything else here. Okay? Did you take screenshot? Okay.
Yes.
Then
Yes.
click on OK, and then click on content types button, which is next to it. Content types button, and here select this option, exclude content types in list. Select exclude content types in list, and only choose the last option, text slash plain. Choose last option, text slash plain. Okay, very, very important, text slash plain. Then click OK. That's it. And go to non-resources and keep it as it is. Okay, don't change anything. Non-resource content types, text as HTML, XML, don't change anything. All these three should be enabled. Okay, I think, and then once you record the script, okay, once you made all these changes, once you make all these changes, uh, okay, if you regenerate the script again. So how do you regenerate the script? So you have to go to record and click on regenerate button here. So once you regenerate, it will regenerate the same script with the latest recording options. Okay, you need not record again, you just have to regenerate the script. So it will regenerate the script with the latest recording settings. Then after you regenerate the script, of course you will land in the recording report like this. Okay, let me do one thing. Let me open another script. So you land I don't know what is. One second. Let me regenerate. See, like this, you will land on this page. Once you regenerate the script, guys. Once you regenerate the script, okay, or once you record the script or regenerate the script, you land on this recording report. First thing is you land on this. Okay. Now when you land on this, check the domains here. The domains which are related to your application, only those domains should be enabled. Okay, let's say the URL what you have tested is web tours, and it is starting with localhost or 127.0.0.1, which is your local IP address, or if it is starting with localhost, then that is your domain. For example, you are testing facebook.com. So facebook.com will be your domain here. Only facebook.com should be enabled. All the other domains should be disabled. So here in your example, if you are testing web tours, if it can be localhost or 127.0.0.1 here, which should be enabled. Other than that, if any other domain is enabled here, you have to uncheck it. Okay, so you just have to uncheck it. For example, how? One second. You just have to uncheck this option, and when you uncheck it, you will see this regenerate button here. Once you uncheck it, you will see this regenerate button. And then when you click on regenerate button, automatically it will remove all unnecessary requests which are not related to our application. That is, so it will remove the requests related to Microsoft.com. For example, if I go to action now, okay, see here, there is something unnecessary here. This one. This domain is not related to us. iecvlist.microsoft.com. This is not our application. Our application is this localhost 1080. This is our application. This is something unnecessary which got recorded. Now, if you go to recording report and if you uncheck that and if you regenerate, click on regenerate the script. Are you sure you want to regenerate? Yes. Now what will happen? It will regenerate the script with the latest options. It will exclude the Microsoft.com domain request. Okay, so now the script is regenerated. Okay, the script is regenerated. Now you go to action. There you see, you won't have any Microsoft.com. See, do you see any Microsoft.com? No. This is our request. This is our request. That means all the unnecessary requests are gone. So now when you have unchecked it, or when you have disabled that option and clicked on regenerate button, this Microsoft.com, it will directly go to recording options, and it will go to mapping and filtering, and it will save here. It will get updated here automatically. That means in all your future recordings, Microsoft.com will be excluded. That means it is applied to the filters list. Now in future, whenever you record, the Microsoft.com will never get recorded for you. So like whenever you record any application, there might be some domains which are not related to your application. You just have to uncheck them and regenerate the script. So and all those domains will get added to this filters list. So the list will keep on adding. Like you see firefox.com, gotomeeting.com, gotomeet.com, live.com, okay, google.co.in, microsoft.com. These are all unwanted domains for our application. So that's the reason all these I have unchecked it and regenerated slowly. So like after few days, this list will be something like this in your laptop also. Okay, so your list will be something like this in your laptop also. All these are unwanted domains. These domains will never be recorded now in your application, in your laptop. Okay, so give a try by doing all these options.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so let me stop recording.